We're live. I love how it says you are live. It's very encouraging. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This is Mind Your Banners postgame. After Indiana 82, Southern Cal 69. Southern Cal's kind of a funky team. Like, they started the season about the way you'd expect, considering just how new they were. I think they're playing a little bit better lately. They certainly kind of got the first shot on Indiana. They were up 22-12 at one point in this game, 24-16. But you felt like from the moment that Indiana engaged with the game the way it needed to, the way it could, there was really kind of a gulf in class between these two teams. And obviously that's borne out, particularly in the second half when Indiana outscores USC by 13, scores 44 points in the second half. Didn't even shoot the ball well tonight and still got to 82. Just generally, I think a decent performance from Indiana.
Well, I think you should mention fifth straight win. Matches the longest winning streak of the last 2 years.
And three of those Big Ten games too. It's not like
a
lot of that's empty calories.
Matches last year's late game win streak that had one game in the Big Ten tournament too. The thing
we're looking over here because the box.
The thing that stuck out to me, Trey Galloway, I thought was sort of the instigator in terms of kind of separating these teams in the second half. Really came out, had a 3-pointer in the corner, was looking for a shot inside. That was the first time I think we've seen him really sort of. I think he's been okay with being the facilitator. And he was that sort of late in the game, set up Oumar Ballo for two alley-oop dunks on the pick and roll, which he's been doing all kind of season. He's had real good chemistry with Ballo, but really looking for a shot. Had 11 points. 9 of those came in the first 6 minutes of the second half, and that was sort of when Indiana kind of took control. Oumar Ballo scores 23. Miles Rice has 19. But I thought without that sort of burst by Trey Galloway, he sort of, he's just had his veteran presence, I think, has been really helpful as this team's trying to find itself. Because, you talk about Niziolek and Zach had an off night. Miles Rice was sort of a non-factor in the first half, but very good in the second half.
Well, I was going to come back to that because I think I would join Rice and Galloway together. Rice committed 3 turnovers in the first 7.5 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
And then he came out, and once he came back in, basically he didn't do anything wrong. I think he had six rebounds and 3 assists in the first half. He scored the bulk of his 19 points in the second half. You take him and Galloway together, 30 points, 11 rebounds, 12 assists, just 5 turnovers. That's after, if memory serves, 17 points, 10 assists, and 5 turnovers together in the Penn State game. Galloway pointed something out that, it's kind of easy to forget. And I think this goes to some what you're talking about, some what I'm talking about. He didn't get any of the offseason with this team.
Right.
This team was trying to pull itself together in June, July, August, September. He wasn't playing with these guys. And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, there's been a ramp up to it, but it feels like Indiana is starting to get a real synergy between those two, Rice and Galloway, that is, kind of keeping just such a steady hand at the wheel for this team, whether it's their own offense, whether it's playmaking. Rice had 9 rebounds tonight. It just feels like those two are really kind of driving the train right now.
Yeah, and I think that, nothing to take away from the 5-game win streak, but I do think there are some fault lines here with sort of this team and sort of where they go from here. Tonight, I think it was you asked about Malik, or you asked about the one big lineup.
Yeah.
And the question was sort of brushed off by Mike Woodson in the sense that he's like, look, Malik Whitman is not going anywhere. His playing time's not going to probably go down when he comes back. So is Oumar Ballo's sort of recent success sort of an illusion of the fact that Renew's out of the lineup? Can he continue to sort of be this impactful with that? And then I do think it's worth mentioning Niziolek and Zach, 20 points, one of his best games this season, first 20-point game in a month. Spent most of the night. He should be fresh for that Iowa game. Only played, 16 minutes?
15,
8 minutes, less than 8 minutes in each half. Missed his first 7 shots, was just completely off. In the second half, came back in, did not look engaged with the game, made kind of 2 mistakes, and went right back to the bench. Kind of curious your thoughts on those 2 different issues. Obviously the one big lineup I think is going to be a lot of talk with the fans too, because you've seen how effective they've been. And then just Niziolek and Zach, not a freshman anymore, sophomore, but just the highs and lows of his season. And I think the ceiling of this team is so much higher when he's not giving you absolutely nothing.
No, obviously I agree with that. And I think to Mbako first, I think it's encouraging.
And I understood Trey Galloway's point, not to interrupt you, but Trey Galloway's point is like, when we win, in spite of that, that's a good sign that we're a deep team.
Yeah,
and
I was going to say, I
that's
think
fair.
To a certain extent, that is a positive in the sense that it is representative of what we've talked about with this team. The idea that if it's playing well, it can absorb an off night from just about anybody.
Sure.
Because somebody else can step in. Tonight Luke Goody's got 16 points. He's been shooting the ball incredibly well lately. I think after a 5 of 20 stretch to start the game, he's up over 40% like his last 10 games. Bryson Tucker had 9 points off the bench, had some really good moments. Obviously, he's got the mid-range. I actually thought it was encouraging to see how good he looked attacking the rim, getting to the rim.
Good move in the
and he had another one where he probably should have scored, but he he kind of double clutched it going up. Forgive me, I got a frog in my throat. So you
came prepared. Some people didn't. There you go.
Oh, thank you. The positive of Mbako is you can absorb a night like this. The negative is obviously you want more consistency, but then you sort of think you do rewind it to where Mackenzie Mbako was a year ago. And you do kind of, if you zoom out, you do sort of see, like if you have, like if you look at like the stock market or something, and you look at like 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, a year, you do see that progression up from, geez, why can't Indiana find anything from Mackenzie Mbako to a point where now it's like, why can't he be a 20-point scorer every night? I think.
Well, I think the lows have been a little lower this season because he's gone 6 games.
The lows were
with single digits, one with the 2 points.
I think the lows were lower last season. It's just that you expect more from him this season, which is fair. And I think that this team's ceiling is determined in part by how much consistency you can draw out of someone who can score the way he can. But you still, I think part of the reason why it stands out more when Mbako plays this way in a game like this is a year ago, you would have just said, well, boy, Indiana just cannot figure out how to get anything from Mackenzie Mbako. Now we've seen Indiana knows how to get that from Mackenzie Mbako. It's just not.
I think the last 2 months, I think you saw more consistency. I mean, the first 2 months of the season last year, he was really, much more. And the lowers were low, like you're saying. But I think in the Big Ten stretch, you didn't see that. And so I'm very interested to see at what point, and I think there was some frustration. Mike Woodson said, he had to look elsewhere because he wasn't going to leave him in. And
that's consistent for Woodson.
That is consistent for Woodson.
He doesn't force guys. He doesn't force it with guys that just aren't shooting well.
But how does he respond to this? And can he string some games together? Because I do think that this team's ceiling takes a hit. Like they've played 2 of the lesser teams on their schedule in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. The last 3 games. Rutgers without their star, and USC, Penn State, obviously a little better. But and another team that shot really poorly from 3-point range. They didn't have a good profile coming in, only 6 of 26. You're not going to, 3 teams in a row too, where off nights, shooting 3-pointer. They're going to need more, and I just feel like he's such an integral piece to how far this team can go, that these nights are sort of concerning for their long-term outlook, is what I guess I would say.
I think the question is of degrees in terms of can Indiana be a bubble team with this Mackenzie Mbako? I think probably. Can Indiana be, if not a Big Ten contender, then at least kind of in the best of the rest group, comfortably in the field, maybe a 6 seed, 5 seed, 6 seed, 7 seed, if Mackenzie Mbako goes to a level where he's just more consistent every night. Yes.
So that's what I said.
But again, that sort of gets back to my point of think about where he was 12 months ago. And you do see a growth there. The question is, can he
but I think it's fair to
expect go up another level.
A guy with his profile and the starting experience he got last year and start every game, that you expect him to be sort of a little more polished and a little, energy hasn't been as much of an issue. I think there were some times last year where he looked disengaged. You haven't seen that as much because he just was missing shots tonight. But I just think every step forward is 2 steps back. And I think I've used that phrase before with him. And at what point does he turn a corner to sort of answer it? But
I think it also, one other thing with him is, and this is something you do see with young players, I think in particular young scorers. He's one of those players where it almost feels like what the kind of night he's going to have based on his first 3 attempts.
Oh, absolutely.
Where if he misses, suddenly he feels like he's forcing, which again is best intentions, thinking, hey, I've got to go find something. My team needs me. You talk about he's not disengaging from the game, but then instead he's forcing it. Right. He's taking bad shots. He's suddenly kind of being detrimental in the other direction where he's trying too hard to make things happen.
And Woodson prevented that from happening by just saying, we'll just take you out.
Yeah. And again, that is one of the strengths of this team.
Yeah.
Is that we've seen it with Miles Rice. We've seen it, with Trey Galloway. We've seen it with, Kanan Carlisle was a starter, and I know Indiana's still looking for a way to get him going. I'm not picking on Kanan Carlisle, but my point is Indiana has been able to move all these pieces around and, consistently enough so far, find the offense it needs, even if a guy's taking a night off. The two big lineups thing, I mean, listen, I don't think you can get past how much more it has all kind of made sense. Because even Miles Rice is over 3 tonight from 3, Mackenzie and Baco's over 5, but I don't know how many of those are bad shots. There were some rough shots, but there were also some shots that came in the flow of the offense. It just didn't go down, which is going to happen some nights. The offense just looks better. And you talk about, USC statistical profile. It surprised me looking at them yesterday, and then I guess I saw this yesterday. Through their first 3 Big Ten games, if you toggled over to their Big Ten only stats on KenPom, they had the 3rd best adjusted efficiency defensively in the conference. And they played Oregon. So, I mean, it's not like they're just playing bad teams. This USC team is long. It's athletic. It's very incomplete because the roster came together so disparately through the offseason. But, you understand why this team can challenge some people defensively. Even on a night when Indiana doesn't shoot the ball very well, they still average 1.14 points per possession. They only turned the ball over 6 times. And that was something else. I think USC was 1st or 2nd in the Big Ten alone in opponent turnover rate. They were turning teams over. My point here is, even on a night when Indiana doesn't shoot it very well, Indiana hits 82 points, has some really good efficiency numbers, rebounding the ball security, and points per possession. It is very difficult to look past the way Indiana has played and the flashes Indiana has shown offensively. Not just, you play one big and that means you have more wings on the floor, shooters, space the floor, etc. But also, I think it's helped Oumar Ballo. He's had more room inside. And that's both because of the floor spacing that he's getting from having, 2 or 3 shooters on the floor. It's also from the fact that, there's only one player who's looking for offense in the lane. So you're not constantly sort of trying to figure out, I go here, give you space, or vice versa. It is very hard, I think, to look past the way Indiana's played through these few games and not feel like if you are Mike Woodson, you at least need to find a way to do some more of this. You don't have to go all out with it, because let's be fair, Malik Reneau's a really good player, very consistent player, maybe this team's most consistent offensive weapon. I'm not saying you bench Malik Reneau by any means, but I think you try to figure out ways to get to some of this more often.
But if Luke Goody keeps playing like this, had 3 3-pointers in the last 3 games, only had that twice in the first 13, and you're hitting 80 points, you're hitting the reset button on the team, really, right? I mean, if once Reneau's back.
So here's Evan Mayakawa has a really interesting number that I'll tease this for the insider for tomorrow. He puts together Indiana a team's most efficient lineups, offense versus defense, best efficiency margin. He goes 2-man lineups, 3-man lineups, 4-man lineups, and 5-man lineups. Luke Goody is in every one of right now. And this was updated this morning. This won't reflect tonight's game, but certainly you would imagine it's even better. Goody had 16 points, hit 4 threes, 4 rebounds. Luke Goody is in every one of.
And Trey Galloway's in 3 of the.
Yes. And I mean, basically, it's Ballo and Goody, Ballo, Goody, Galloway, Ballo, Goody, Galloway, and Baco, Ballo, Goody, Galloway, and Baco, Rice. It is the best lineup that we've seen Indiana run without Malik Reneau, which has been the starting 5, even with Mackenzie and Baco's performance tonight.
Yeah, Baco might drop out.
You still can't ignore the idea that Indiana has been a more efficient team, has actually been a slightly better rebounding team, and has been, more offensively potent with these lineups.
Well, what's the solution, right? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, no, it's because it's difficult.
Just somebody cut this team's awful. Because Woodson didn't sound like a person that's sort of like, I'm keeping my eye on the metrics when his answer. I know
no, he said
on no equivocation that it sounded like we'll go back to him as a starter and that's it. I just don't know how you fix it with him and Ballo playing near 30 minutes a night.
Yeah. I don't either. I mean, but I think it is listen, until Malik Renew comes back, obviously this is what Indiana.
It's a hypothetical conversation for right now. But
once Renew
so
comes
he's
back,
out 2 weeks, and they continue to win too. Like, what if they win, 4 more in a row or something like that? Do you hit the hard reset button just because guys start? And those are, injury. It's tough, but I don't know. I don't know if you reset the apple cart here based on how they're. It's the best we've seen them play.
No, it is, and it's worth saying too. You're talking about 2 players that have benefited a lot from this, at least in the small sample size we're dealing with, are a 4th-year player and a 6th-year player. So it's not like, if Indiana brought Bryson Tucker in and he had a couple good games, you might be allowed to say, well, maybe that's just a freshman who's been a little bit comfortable. These are guys. Luke Goody is back at basically his career 3-point shooting average. This is what Oumar Ballo has been at times when he's been at his best in college in general. Yeah, listen, this is why coaches get paid. Part of why coaches get paid what they get paid. You've got to figure it out, because the reality is they are just better right now anyway with these lineups. And I think you've got to figure out a way to preserve this even as you absorb Malik Renew back in, because listen, there's somebody, Andrew Jones here, commented that Indiana's 9-1 in its last 10, and obviously a number of those games are going to be guarantee games. But the thing is, if you do want to sort of view that through a certain prism, Indiana's 9-1 in its last 10 games, and it was tied or maybe behind by like a point with 7 minutes left in the one game it lost. So through a certain lens, Indiana's basically had 7 bad minutes in the last 10 games.
Yeah.
And that's the only difference between Indiana and maybe.
Well, no, I don't know if that's true, because some of those guarantee games, they did not play very well.
That's fair. But you understand what I'm saying. For all that we understandably, I think justifiably have cast some doubts on this team through the first couple of months of the season, there is an argument that it's better now than maybe we thought it would be when we saw that performance against Louisville, when we saw that performance against Gonzaga. The one thing I would say is, and we'll wrap this up here, we're going to find out because Indiana's at Iowa.
These predictions?
Yeah, this is, well, so yeah, and we talked about this on the podcast yesterday. Ken Pom has Indiana losing. The thing is, the Ken Pom formula basically says on a game-by-game basis, this is the projection.
Right.
But then it also projects out basically saying the wider averages mean they won't lose every one of those, especially because a lot of these are coin toss games.
Should not look at the.
I think it's 11 in a row. It's
2, 4,
10 in
6,
10 I think it's 10 in a row
9?
maybe now.
No,
9 in a row. Maybe they just moved ahead of UCLA. They were
9,
they were behind UCLA, so it was 11 in a row, and
they
then
just picked up a win against you. So 2 wins tonight. There you
the
go.
Cronin's furious all over again.
He's going to call a press conference.
But the point is, Iowa away, Illinois at home, Ohio State, Northwestern away, Maryland at home, Purdue and Wisconsin away, Michigan at home, Michigan State away, UCLA, Purdue, and Penn
I
State
do
at
think
home.
this discussion gets shaped by how we're looking at the schedule here. That Illinois game, Ohio State on the road. If they continue to play like this against those teams, then I think that's a discussion
100%.
really worth having.
100%.
Because if they go, beat Iowa, win or lose, whatever. But if they go to Illinois, get blown up by 20, or go to Ohio State and have a disappointing effort, then it's not going to, you're not upsetting anything. But you start rattling off more wins here with this lineup. I do think it's going to be a discussion. It'll be an interesting kind of couple of weeks to see what January 18th, 19th, when we sort of revisit this team. Are we saying the same thing? Because then I think it'll be really upon Mike Woodson. He's going to have a difficult choice, because that's not an easy thing to do, to say to a kid like Malik Renew who's done nothing wrong that you have to play less,
or at least play different.
Yeah,
yeah. Again, I don't know how you square that circle, but I think it's something Indiana's got to have.
We got some
more and more.
Here. What
play Ballo and Rice 40 minutes. I don't think you can.
I don't think Ballo's playing 40 minutes.
I don't think it's healthy. The thing is, you don't have to play Rice 40 minutes. He played 33 tonight. Kaden Carlisle wasn't great, but he was fine. The shot selection was what it was.
Ballo had 33, so that was on the higher side for him this
He's
season.
played 32, 32, and 33 in the last 3 games.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's not playing minutes.
Yeah.
He's not playing big minutes. I mean, that's, I think he only averaged like 27 last year at Arizona. That's more than he normally plays. You
Can you
can't
throw it when Trico's how do you throw him up there? Do you do that right?
hit show. There you
There you
go. When he's healthy, I
See, I think this team becomes interesting, like if you have Renew as your 6-man because of his efficiency and like the way he can score off them. Like he never doesn't score, right?
Yeah.
As a 6-man, and because that's really this team's problem right now. They had a little bit better performance on the bench. Was it 13 points? But Mike Woodson's been looking for consistent scoring off the bench, and they just haven't had it. Bryson Tucker's been up and down. Hatton and Leal give you effort, but really struggle offensively. Leal had a missed dunk on a stop that almost had him falling out of the chair laughing. And Carolyn Carlisle's obviously really struggling, but true. But so does Renew really elevate that bench? You know, in 15 minutes, I mean, he could give you 12 a game, right?
Yeah, but I think you got to give him more
20
than
minutes,
15
whatever. But I mean,
yeah.
like
You
he
can't
probably has to come down 10 minutes.
You can't play anybody 40 minutes, and you shouldn't split minutes just,
But I'm
20,
saying-
20 down the middle,
Sure.
the way like you do with a youth team where it's like,
But
yeah,
Ballo
you get the first
play-
quarter, you get the second quarter.
Ballo moves down to about 27, 28. And Malik's a little lower, but maybe doesn't start like 23, 24. Does that work? Does that
Maybe.
fit? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. What I will say is these solutions are always easier for everyone to come to together when you're winning. And Indiana has won 5 in a row. The Hoosiers are 13-3 now. They are 4-1 in the Big Ten. They are at Iowa Saturday night. He'll be there. I'll be watching from home. So we won't have one of these Saturday night, but we will be back next week for our regularly scheduled programming. Until then, for the Indianapolis Star, the Blue General Times, he's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. Thank you so much for watching Mind Your Manners postgame. We'll talk to you soon.